Waitress, fired for helping, undercover. Black CEO, next day she becomes the boss. Megan Carter's hands tightened around the straps of her apron as she stood frozen in front of the manager's office. "You're firing me?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Tom Blake, the manager of Lancaster Diner, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "It's just not working out," he said, the words rolling off his tongue with the ease of someone who had said them 100 times before. Megan swallowed hard. She had worked at this place for 3 years, never late, never missing a shift, never giving anyone a reason to doubt her work ethic. And yet, here she was, being pushed out like she was nothing. She knew exactly why. "This is about last night, isn't it?" she asked, her voice sharper now. Tom's gaze flickered, but he recovered quickly. "We have expectations for how we run things here," he said vaguely, flipping through a stack of papers on his desk as if he had more important things to do than fire her. Megan let out a short, humorless laugh. "Expectations?" she echoed. "You mean ignoring customers who don't look like they'll tip big? Letting Beth and Jason decide who's worth serving?" Tom's expression darkened. "Watch yourself, Carter." "No," Megan snapped, stepping forward, "because I watched you last night. I watched Beth ignore that man like he wasn't even there. I watched Jason roll his eyes when he asked for a menu. And I watched you peeking out of your office, pretending you didn't see a damn thing." Tom's jaw clenched. "You don't run this place, Megan." "No," she shot back, "but I did my job, and that's why I'm being fired." Tom exhaled sharply and stood up. "Your final paycheck will be ready next week. Now I suggest you leave before you make this harder on yourself." Megan stared at him, heart pounding. Everything in her screamed to fight back, to demand justice, to make him say out loud that she was being fired for treating someone like a human being. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Beth and Jason were watching from the dining area, whispering to each other. Beth smirked as Megan emerged from the office, as if she had won something. Megan forced herself to stand tall, shoulders squared. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she walked to the counter, untied her apron, and placed it neatly on top. She would not let them see her crumble. But as she stepped out into the cold morning air, her mind was already spiraling. What now? The night before, she had no idea that one small act of kindness would change everything. It was a slow Wednesday shift. Megan had been refilling sugar dispensers when she heard the bell above the door chime. An older black man stepped in. He wore a clean but slightly worn button-up, and his posture was measured, as if he was already expecting to be ignored. And he was right. Beth didn't look up from her phone. Jason glanced at the man, made a split-second decision, and turned his back. Megan's stomach twisted. She had seen it happen before. How they picked and chose who was worth their attention. A well-dressed businessman? They'd fight over who got his table. A construction worker in worn boots. He'd wait 20 minutes before anyone bothered to serve him. But this man, he wasn't rich-looking or flashy. And that meant one thing. They weren't going to serve him. Megan had a choice. She could do what she always did, keep her head down, ignore it, pretend it wasn't happening, or she could do what was right. She grabbed a menu, plastered on a smile, and walked straight over. "Good evening, sir," she said warmly. "Just you tonight." The man looked up at her, eyes studying hers for a long moment. Then, as if deciding she was genuine, he nodded. "Just me." "Booth okay?" "Perfectly fine." She led him to a window seat and set the menu in front of him. "What can I get you to drink?" "Coffee," he said, his voice steady. "Black." Megan turned, catching Jason watching her from across the room, shaking his head. She ignored him and poured the coffee herself. When she returned, the man glanced around the room before looking back at her. His voice was low when he asked, "You the only one working tonight?" Megan knew what he meant. She cast a glance over her shoulder. Beth scrolling through Instagram, Jason laughing with another server, Tom pretending to be busy in his office. "Feels like it sometimes," she murmured. That made the man chuckle. "What's good here?" Megan smiled. "That depends. If you want something solid, the pot roast is made fresh." "But my personal favorite? The grilled salmon." His eyebrow lifted. "That so?" She nodded. "Promise you won't regret it." His lips quirked into a small smile. "Then salmon it is." As she walked away, she felt the weight of the eyes on her. Beth whispered something to Jason, and they both laughed. "She's wasting her time," Beth muttered, just loud enough for Megan to hear. Megan clenched her jaw but said nothing. When she returned with the man's food, she noticed something strange. The way he watched her, how he took in everything happening around him. There was something different about him. He wasn't just another customer. And she would soon find out why. Now she was unemployed. Megan sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Her mind spun. How was she going to pay rent? How was she going to help Evan with groceries? What was she supposed to do now? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A deep voice came through the line. Megan caught her. She straightened. "Yes? This is Richard Lawson." Her stomach dropped. Richard Lawson, as in the man she had served last night, as in the CEO of Lancaster Diner. Her throat went dry. I'm sorry. Who?" "The man you served last night," he said. "The one your co-workers ignored." Megan's breath caught. "I heard what happened this morning," Richard continued, "and I want to talk." Her pulse pounded. "About what?" Richard's next word sent a chill down her spine. "About fixing the mistake they made." Megan's heart raced because something told her this wasn't just about her losing a job. It was about what happened next. Megan sat in stunned silence, gripping the phone so tightly, her fingers ached. Richard Lawson. She had served dozens of customers at Lancaster Diner, but never someone like him. And certainly not someone who would call her the next morning after she'd been fired for doing the right thing. Her brain scrambled for something, anything logical to say. I don't understand. Why are you calling me?" "I want to meet," Richard said, his voice steady. "Are you free this morning?" Megan blinked at the absurdity of the question. Free. She had just been fired. She had nowhere to go, no shifts to clock into, no paycheck coming next week. But she wasn't about to say that out loud. Yeah." "Where?" Richard didn't hesitate. "There's a coffee shop on Maple and 4th. Can you be there in an hour?" Megan's heart pounded. A meeting. With him. She had two choices. She could let this be just another bad day, another moment where she let the world knock her down and she stayed down. Or she could go. Find out why he wanted to talk. She exhaled sharply. "I'll be there." An hour later, Megan sat across from Richard in a quiet corner of the cafe, a hot cup of coffee between them. She had spent half an hour agonizing over what to wear, ultimately settling for something simple, dark jeans, a navy blouse, and the only blazer she owned. She had considered pulling her hair into a neat ponytail, but decided against it. She wasn't here to impress him. She was here to get answers. Richard, however, looked like he belonged at a Wall Street meeting. His suit was sharp, his watch gleamed under the morning light, and his entire demeanor exuded power and control. Megan had no idea how she ended up sitting across from him. "You probably have questions," Richard said, setting his coffee down. Megan let out a breathless chuckle. "Yeah?" "A few," Richard leaned forward slightly. "I own Lancaster Diner." She already knew that, but hearing it again felt different. "I visit my businesses unannounced," he continued, "because the only way to really know how a company is running is to see it from the ground level. No one knows who I am when I walk in. That's how I saw what happened last night. Megan's fingers tightened around her cup. And? Richard's gaze didn't waver. And I saw everything. Megan stayed silent, waiting. I watched your co-workers ignore me. I watched your manager pretend not to see. I saw exactly how they treated customers based on their own biases. He paused. And I saw you. Megan felt heat rise to her cheeks. I was just doing my job. That's exactly the point, Richard said, his voice low. You were the only one who did, and because of that, they fired you. Megan bit the inside of her cheek. So why am I here? Richard leaned back, studying her. Because I need people like you running my businesses. Megan's stomach flipped. What? I fired Tom this morning, Richard said casually, like he was discussing the weather. Beth and Jason, on their way out too. Lancaster Diner needs a clean slate and a new manager. Megan stared at him, heart hammering. A new... She let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Are you saying you want me to take Tom's job? Richard didn't blink. Yes. The cafe seemed to tilt around her. Yesterday she had been a waitress, a nobody in their eyes. This morning she had woken up unemployed, and now Richard Lawson was offering her the job of the man who had fired her. Why me? She blurted out. Richard took a sip of his coffee before answering. Because you care about the people you serve, and that's the kind of leadership I need. Megan shook her head. But I don't have management experience. You have 3 years of experience dealing with customers, Richard countered. You've worked under bad leadership long enough to know what not to do. And I saw how you handled yourself last night. You stayed professional, you didn't retaliate, and you made sure a customer, me, was treated with respect. Megan swallowed. It's not that simple, Richard raised a brow. Isn't it? Her mind raced. If she said no, she'd walk out of here the same as she had walked in, jobless, uncertain, stuck in the same cycle. But if she said yes, she'd walk back into Lancaster Diner as the boss. Tom's office would be hers. Beth and Jason would have to answer to her. She thought of the way Beth had smirked when she was fired, the way Jason had laughed. Megan exhaled. What would it take? She asked finally. Richard smiled slightly. You show up tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. We go over the books, the staff, everything you need to know. After that, it's yours to run. Megan hesitated, staring at the coffee swirling in her cup. Do you think you can handle it? Richard asked. Megan looked up, and she wasn't sure if it was determination or adrenaline, but she felt something shift inside her. Yes, she said. I can handle it. The next morning, Megan stood outside Lancaster Diner, her new workplace. It looked exactly the same as it had every morning for the past 3 years. The scent of fresh coffee and buttered toast wafted through the air. The bell above the door jingled as customers walked in, but everything was different. Because she was different. She wasn't walking in to take orders anymore. She was walking in to run this place. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and pushed open the door. Beth was behind the counter, flipping through her phone. Jason was leaning against the drink station, talking to one of the busboys. Neither of them looked up at first. Then they did, and their smirks disappeared. Megan savored the moment, the way their faces twisted in confusion. Beth stood up straight. What the hell are you doing here? Megan smiled. I work here, she said. As of this morning, I'm the new manager. Jason looked like he had been hit with a brick. Beth's mouth opened, then closed. Tom was nowhere to be seen. Megan set her bag down on the counter with purpose. Let's get to work, she said. She watched Beth clench her jaw. Jason shoved his hands in his pockets, looking like he wanted to disappear. This was only the beginning. Megan knew she had a long road ahead. There would be pushback, resentment, and plenty of battles to fight. But she was ready, because this was her diner now. and things were about to change. Megan had been in charge for less than an hour, and she could already feel the tension radiating through the diner like a storm about to break. Beth hadn't stopped glaring since Megan had walked in that morning. Jason was moving like he was just waiting for someone to tell him it was all a joke. And the rest of the staff? They didn't know what to make of it yet. Megan wasn't surprised. They had all seen her get fired yesterday. Now here she was, standing behind the counter as their boss. She wasn't going to waste time explaining herself. She had work to do. Megan turned to the cook, a middle-aged man named Pete, who had worked at Lancaster Diner longer than anyone else. He had seen managers come and go, and unlike Beth and Jason, he hadn't been openly disrespectful. He was just a guy who did his job. "What's the food inventory situation?" she asked. "We running low on anything?" Pete blinked at her, clearly caught off guard by the question. He looked at Richard, who was sitting in the corner, watching everything unfold with the calm patience of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "We're good on most things," Pete finally said. "Eggs and bacon shipment comes in tomorrow morning. We're running low on coffee beans, though." Megan nodded. "I'll call the supplier today. Make sure we don't run out." Pete hesitated for a second, then a slow nod of approval. Beth let out an annoyed scoff from behind the counter. Megan turned. "Something you want to say?" Beth crossed her arms. "You think just because Richard Lawson handed you this job, we're all supposed to just fall in line?" Megan didn't flinch. "No," she said simply. "I think you're supposed to do your job. If you can't handle that, let me know now." Beth opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. Jason muttered something under his breath but grabbed a tray and started actually working, for the first time that morning. Megan turned back to Pete. "Kitchen runs how it's supposed to. Let me know if you need anything else." She walked toward the office, the one that had belonged to Tom just yesterday. Now it was hers. Inside the office, Megan shut the door and leaned against it, exhaling a slow, controlled breath. Her hands shook slightly as she looked around the space. Tom had left it exactly as it was. Messy, cluttered, and completely unorganized. Piles of paperwork sat untouched. A week's worth of invoices, employee schedules with random notes scribbled across them, an old coffee mug, still half full with cold, stale liquid. This was where he had sat when he fired her. Now it was where she would fix everything he had broken. Megan dropped into the chair and forced herself to focus. She started flipping through the papers on the desk, trying to piece together the disaster that was Lancaster Diner's management. She didn't expect to find a bombshell within minutes. But she did. An invoice from a food supplier. One Megan had never heard of. Her eyes scanned the numbers, her stomach tightening. The prices were off. Way too high. She grabbed another invoice from a different supplier, a legitimate one. The difference was staggering. Megan's mind raced. Had Tom been overpaying on purpose? No, he wasn't just overpaying. He was stealing. Her pulse pounded. It was a scheme she had heard of before. Inflate supplier costs, pocket the extra, and no one ever questions it. But Tom was gone now. And she was the one looking at the proof. A knock on the office door made her jump. She shoved the invoices into a drawer and forced her face into neutrality before opening the door. Richard stood there, arms crossed, like he already knew she had found something. "Settling in?" he asked. Megan let out a dry laugh. "You could say that." Richard glanced over her shoulder at the disaster on the desk. "How bad is it?" Megan exhaled. "Worse than I expected." Richard nodded like he had already suspected it. Then his eyes sharpened. "You found something." Megan hesitated. She didn't know how much she could say yet, not until she was sure. So she only said, "I have questions." Richard studied her, then nodded. "Good. Beth and Jason are already pushing back," she added. Richard smirked. That didn't take long. Megan shook her head. It's fine, they can glare all they want. They're either going to get with the program or they won't be here much longer. Richard's expression shifted slightly. Not surprise. Approval. Keep that energy, he said. Then he glanced at the diner through the small office window. Because I have a feeling things are about to get even messier. Megan stepped back out into the diner just in time to see a customer storming toward the counter. Beth was mid-argument, her voice too loud, her expression too smug. Megan moved fast. Is there a problem? The customer, a middle-aged woman, turned. Are you in charge here? Yes, Megan said immediately. Beth rolled her eyes. It's just a misunderstanding. No, it's not, the woman snapped. I was waiting for over 10 minutes for a simple coffee refill while she stood here texting on her phone. Beth's jaw clenched. I was busy. No, Megan cut her off. You weren't. Beth's smirk vanished. Megan turned back to the customer. I'm sorry that happened. Your coffee is on the house, Beth scoffed. Are you serious? Megan didn't even look at her. Jason, take over Beth's station, she said. Jason, who had been watching like it was a reality show, froze. What? You heard me. Beth's voice sharpened. You can't do that. Megan turned to her now. I can, and I just did. For the first time that morning, Beth looked nervous. Megan held her gaze. Break room, now. Beth hesitated. Megan didn't move. Beth let out a frustrated breath and stormed away. Megan turned back to the customer. I'll be right back with that coffee. The woman nodded, watching Beth leave with satisfaction. Megan forced herself to stay calm. Beth was about to learn exactly who she was dealing with, and if she didn't fall in line, she'd be next out the door. End of Chapter 3. This chapter raises the stakes, introduces internal conflict with Beth and Jason, and plants the mystery of Tom's corruption, keeping the tension high. Megan is finding her power, but the battle isn't over. Ready for Chapter 4 when you are. Megan shut the door to the break room and turned to Beth, who was already leaning against the table with her arms crossed, her face twisted in barely concealed defiance. This is ridiculous, Beth spat. I've been here longer than you, and now you think you can just— Yes, Megan interrupted, her voice firm. That's exactly what's happening. Beth's nostrils flared. Megan took a step forward. You don't have to like it, but you will respect it. If you don't want to be here, you're free to leave. Beth let out a bitter laugh. You really think Richard's going to back you up if you start firing people left and right? Megan didn't blink. Try me. Beth scoffed, but there was hesitation behind the attitude now. Megan let the silence stretch between them before she finally spoke again, her tone sharp and unwavering. You've spent too long thinking you get to decide which customers matter and which don't, Megan said. And I've had enough. Beth narrowed her eyes. You have no idea how things actually work around here. Megan tilted her head slightly. Oh, I think I do. Beth's jaw clenched. So what? You think you're better than us? Megan's expression didn't change. I think I do my job, unlike you. Beth opened her mouth, but shut it just as quickly. Megan held her gaze, waiting for any sign of actual pushback. None came. She nodded. Good. Now get back to work. Beth exhaled sharply, snatched up a napkin from the table like she needed something to rip apart, and stormed out. Megan stood there for a moment, pulse pounding, before following her out. Beth might not like it, but she was starting to get the message, and Megan wasn't done sending them yet. By noon, the diner was in full swing, packed with customers. Megan worked alongside her staff, not just overseeing them. She grabbed plates when needed, checked in on tables, made sure things ran smoothly. And people noticed. Customers who had been ignored before were suddenly being served with the same enthusiasm as everyone else. A woman at the counter, an older black woman in a bright red cardigan, smiled at Megan as she refilled her coffee. "You run this place?" she asked. Megan smiled. "Trying to." The woman nodded approvingly. "It's about time someone with sense took over." Megan felt a quiet surge of pride. She didn't just want to manage Lancaster Diner. She wanted to fix it. But then the afternoon took a turn. A group of men in suits walked in. Megan spotted them immediately. They had the look of people who were used to being in charge, and judging by the way Jason straightened his posture like a soldier at attention, she knew they weren't regular customers. Richard and the board members. Megan felt the weight of their presence even before they reached the counter. Richard's sharp eyes scanned the room with quiet calculation. Then he spotted Megan. His lips curled slightly, almost approving. Megan wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward. "Gentlemen," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Table for 3. Richard's smirk widened slightly. "We'll take the booth by the window," he said. Megan nodded. "Right this way." As she led them to their seats, she felt Beth's eyes burning into her from across the room. She didn't care. This was her moment, and she was about to prove exactly why Richard had put her in charge. Megan delivered their coffee herself, setting the cups down without spilling a single drop, keeping her movements precise and professional. Richard leaned back in his seat, watching her closely. "So," he said after taking a slow sip, "how's it been, boss?" Megan knew everyone was listening now. Beth, Jason, even Pete had slowed down behind the kitchen window. She wouldn't hesitate. "Rough start," she admitted, "but I expected that." One of the board members, a man with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit, raised an eyebrow. "What's been the biggest challenge?" Megan met his gaze without flinching. "Cleaning up the culture." Richard's smirk deepened. Beth dropped a plate in the background. Megan didn't turn around. The salt and pepper-haired man studied her. "And you think you can do that?" Megan held his gaze. "Yes." The board member nodded slowly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. Richard set his coffee down. "She already has," he said simply. Beth stiffened in the background. Jason looked away. And Megan felt it. The shift. The moment where the entire diner started to understand. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a test. This was permanent. Megan was here to stay. And for the first time since stepping into Tom's old office, she felt completely, undeniably in control. She was still riding the adrenaline of that moment when the board left, and the diner settled back into its normal rhythm. But the afternoon wasn't over yet, because Beth was waiting for her near the kitchen, arms crossed. "You really think you've won?" she muttered. Megan arched an eyebrow. Beth let out a sharp breath. "You don't know this place like I do." Megan's expression didn't change. "Maybe not," she said, "but I know enough." Beth's hands curled into tight fists. Megan tilted her head slightly. "You want to quit?" she asked. Beth didn't answer immediately. Megan waited. Then, finally, Beth spun on her heel and walked away. Megan exhaled slowly. The battle wasn't over, but Beth had just made a choice, and if she didn't change, she'd be next out the door. Megan wasn't backing down. She had earned her place. And nobody, not Beth, not Jason, not even the past, was going to take that from her. Megan had barely finished catching her breath after the board's visit when the first real crack in the system finally broke. Beth was fuming. Jason looked like he had swallowed a lemon. The rest of the staff was treading carefully, like they weren't sure whether to celebrate the shift in power or brace for impact. Megan could feel it. The weight of unspoken resentment, of years of toxic culture finally being challenged. And she knew something was coming. She just didn't expect it to happen so soon. By the time the evening rush hit, things had settled into a tense, uneasy rhythm. Megan moved between the tables, checking on customers, watching the staff closely. Beth was still doing her job, but her usual fake smiles were gone. Instead, she worked with cold precision, as if proving a point. Jason, on the other hand, was doing the bare minimum, his frustration showing with every half-hearted order he took. Then it happened. A couple walked in, a black man in a tailored suit and a white woman in a floral dress. They looked like they had just come from a business meeting. The man carried himself with quiet confidence, while the woman had the effortless ease of someone used to being treated well. Megan noticed the shift immediately. Jason's body language tightened. Beth barely glanced their way. The couple approached the host stand, looking around expectantly. Jason should have greeted them. He didn't. Megan waited. Beth should have at least acknowledged their presence. She didn't. Instead, they both stood there, deliberately ignoring the couple, just like they had done with Richard that night. Megan felt her blood simmer. This was exactly the kind of thing she was here to stop. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked straight past Jason and Beth. "Good evening," she said, flashing the couple a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome to Lancaster Grill. Table for two?" The woman smiled back, appreciative. "Yes, please." Megan grabbed 2 menus and gestured toward an open table. "Right this way." As she walked them to their seats, she could feel Beth and Jason's eyes burning into her back. Good. Let them watch. By the time she returned to the front, Jason was seething. "What the hell was that?" he hissed under his breath. Megan tilted her head. "That," she said, keeping her voice calm but sharp. "That was me doing my job." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We don't waste time on customers like that." Beth wanted to paint herself as the victim, to convince the rest of the staff that Megan was out for blood, that she was just another tyrant with a clipboard and a title. Number Megan wouldn't give her the satisfaction. So instead she smiled. "I'm glad you said that, Beth," she said, voice calm. "Because I was just about to call the kitchen in for a meeting. Maybe we should get to the bottom of this." Beth's smirk wavered. Megan turned toward the pass-through window. "Hey, chef?" A stocky man in a grease-stained apron poked his head out. "Yeah, boss." Megan gestured toward the plate. "Did this come from you?" Chef glanced at it. "Nah, that's not what I sent out." His brows furrowed. "We did the order right." Megan turned back to Beth. Beth opened her mouth, then shut it again. The entire kitchen was watching now. Megan folded her arms. So, if the kitchen did the order right, who messed it up? Beth's face darkened, but she knew she was cornered. She huffed and walked away, mumbling something under her breath. Megan let her go, but she wasn't done yet. Not even close. By lunchtime, Megan had had enough. Beth wasn't going to stop. She had made that very clear. So Megan did something Beth never expected. She called a staff meeting, right in the middle of the day. Beth rolled her eyes, arms crossed. Some of the younger servers shifted nervously, clearly unsure which side to take. The kitchen staff leaned against the counters, waiting. Megan took a deep breath. "We need to talk," she said, "because what's happening in this restaurant right now? It stops today." Silence. Megan looked right at Beth. "Some of you don't like the changes. I get that. But let me be crystal clear. You don't have to like me. But you do have to do your job." Beth snorted. "Oh, please, you're just throwing your weight around because you got lucky." Megan smiled. "Lucky?" She took a step forward. "Beth, you and Jason ran this place like it was your personal playground for years. You controlled who got good service, who got ignored, who got pushed out." She let that sit for a moment. "And yet, here we are," Megan said, her voice steady and cutting. "Jason is gone. And you?" She tilted her head. "You're the one scrambling to stay relevant." Beth's face turned red. She opened her mouth, ready to fight back, But Megan wasn't done yet. She turned to the rest of the staff. "I don't care how things used to be," she said, "but I do care about how things are going forward. If you're here to work, great. If you're here to undermine this place, there's the door." Silence. Megan let her words sink in. Beth's jaw clenched, her fingers digging into her arms. Finally, she scoffed. "You really think you can change this place?" Megan didn't hesitate. "I already have." Beth stared at her, but for the first time, Megan saw something new in her eyes. Doubt. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought she was, and she knew it. Megan let a slow smirk tug at the corner of her lips. Beth turned on her heel and stormed out of the break room, slamming the door behind her. The second she was gone, a hush fell over the staff. Megan exhaled, then turned back to the others. "Anyone else have a problem?" No one moved. No one spoke. Megan gave a satisfied nod. "Then let's get back to work." As she walked out of the break room, Megan knew one thing for certain. Beth's days were numbered. Megan stood in the middle of Lancaster Grill, watching as the reality of the new order settled into place. The air felt different, lighter, freer, but there was still tension lurking beneath the surface. Not everyone had adjusted to the changes, and she knew it. Beth was still seething. Jason, too. They had spent years running this place their way, deciding which customers were worth serving, deciding how things should be done. Now they were powerless, forced to work under her, and they hated it. Megan could feel their stares from across the diner. The way Jason's eyes burned with resentment, the way Beth whispered to the other staff when she thought Megan wasn't looking. They hadn't openly defied her, not yet, but she could sense the storm brewing. She was ready for it. The door swung open and a small group of customers walked in. Megan straightened, watching as Beth hesitated behind the counter. Normally, she would have greeted them if she deemed them worthy. Megan didn't give her the chance. "Welcome to Lancaster Grill," she called out before Beth could even open her mouth. She made a point to step forward, giving the customers a warm smile. "Let me show you to your table." Beth's mouth twitched, but she said nothing. Good. Megan led the customers to a booth, taking their drink orders personally. As she walked back toward the counter, she caught Jason shaking his head. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice low but not low enough. Megan stopped mid-step. "Something wrong, Jason?" He looked up, his expression carefully blank. "Nothing." "Really?" Megan tilted her head. "Because it sounded like you had something to say." Jason hesitated, but then the corner of his mouth lifted in a smirk. "Just funny is all." Megan folded her arms. "What is?" "That you think you can change everything." He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "You think you can fix this place overnight? That people like—" He stopped himself, but Megan knew exactly what he was about to say. People like him. People like the man she had served that night, the CEO who changed everything. Megan's jaw tightened. "I don't think I can change everything overnight, Jason, but I can damn sure change this diner. And if you have a problem with that, you're welcome to find another job." Jason's smirk faltered. He wasn't stupid. He needed this paycheck. Beth, however, was not as smart. "This whole thing is a joke," she muttered under her breath. Megan turned to her. "What was that, Beth?" Beth lifted her chin. "You don't belong here." The words hung in the air. Megan felt the weight of them, the sting behind them. Not because they were true, because they were exactly what Beth had always believed, that she and Jason ran this place, that they got to decide who mattered. Not anymore. Megan took a slow step forward, lowering her voice so that only Beth could hear. "I belong here more than you ever did." Beth's nostrils flared. "You got lucky." Megan let out a sharp laugh. "No, Beth. You got lucky. You got away with treating people like garbage for years, and nobody ever called you out. But now, Now your luck is running out." Beth's face burned red, but she said nothing. Megan didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The shift dragged on, the tension lingering in every corner of the diner. Beth was quieter than usual, but that didn't mean she had accepted defeat. Jason still looked like he was ready to snap at any second. And the other employees? They were watching. Some of them were warming up to Megan's leadership. The younger ones, like Noah, the busboy, seemed to appreciate the changes. Others were still hesitant, unsure of whether they should follow Megan's lead or wait to see if the old regime made a comeback. Megan needed to send a message. She got her chance when a group of customers walked in, a working-class family, a black father, and his 2 young sons. Megan saw the way Beth tensed behind the counter, the way Jason's mouth twitched. They were about to ignore them. Not today. Megan moved first, stepping forward before anyone else could react. "Welcome in," she said, smiling warmly. "Come on, let's get you seated." The father looked surprised, but only for a second. He gave her a grateful nod, guiding his sons toward the table she led them to. As Megan handed them their menus, she could feel the eyes on her. Beth, Jason, a few of the others. She didn't care. She took their drink orders, making sure they were comfortable before heading back to the counter. Beth was seething. "You're doing this on purpose," she hissed. Megan arched an eyebrow. "Doing what, exactly?" Beth's hands clenched. "You're trying to make us look bad." Megan laughed. "I don't have to try, Beth. You do that all on your own." Beth's face turned red. Jason was gripping the counter so hard his knuckles were white. Megan was winning. She could feel it. An hour later, the diner was still buzzing with activity. Megan was helping Noah restock the napkin holders when she heard the sound of heels clicking against the floor. She turned just in time to see a familiar figure walking through the front doors. Richard Lawson, the CEO, the man who had given her this job. The diner fell silent. Beth's eyes went wide. Jason straightened, his jaw tightening. Richard strode in, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He wasn't here for food. He was here to check on her. Megan felt the nerves creep up her spine, but she refused to show it. She stepped forward to meet him. "Mr. Lawson." Richard studied her, then glanced around the restaurant. "How's everything going?" Megan kept her posture straight. "I think we're making progress." Richard gave a slow nod. "Good." Then he looked toward Beth and Jason. The tension in the diner was thick. Beth wouldn't meet his eyes. Jason looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Richard turned back to Megan. "And the staff?" Megan took a slow breath. "Some of them are adjusting." Richard smirked. "And the ones who aren't?" Megan met his gaze directly. "They won't last." Richard's smirk widened just slightly. "That's what I like to hear." The moment felt huge. Richard was testing her, seeing if she was really ready to lead. Megan had passed. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't the girl they had fired. She was the boss. And she was just getting started. The morning rush was in full swing. Lancaster Grill was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, the sizzle of bacon on the griddle. It all blended together into something almost electric. Megan stood near the counter, arms crossed as she watched everything unfold. A month ago, she had been a waitress who kept her head down, doing what was expected just to keep her job. Now she was in charge. She had spent the last few weeks rebuilding this place from the inside out. No more whispered insults, no more ignored customers, no more selective service based on what someone looked like or how much money they seemed to have. But that didn't mean everyone had accepted the new order. Beth was still clinging to her old ways, walking through shifts with an attitude thick enough to choke on. Jason barely spoke unless he had to, avoiding Megan's eyes whenever possible. It was clear they were waiting for something, waiting for her to fail, waiting for Richard to decide he had made a mistake. She had a feeling they wouldn't have to wait much longer, because today things were coming to a head. It started with a customer complaint. An older man, well-dressed, polished, the kind of customer Beth would have been falling over herself to impress in the past, was standing near the register, arms folded, irritation written all over his face. Beth was next to him, her hands on her hips, her lips pressed into a smug line. "I just think it's funny," she was saying, voice loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You never had problems with service before she took over, right, sir?" Megan's jaw tightened. Beth was playing dirty. She knew exactly what she was doing, planting seeds of doubt, stirring the pot, making it look like things had been better before Megan became manager. Megan walked over, keeping her voice calm. "Is there a problem here?" Beth barely looked at her. "This gentleman has been waiting too long for his coffee, way too long, and I was just telling him how that never used to happen." Megan turned to the customer. "Sir, I'm sorry for the delay. If there was an issue, I'd be happy to fix it myself." The man gave a stiff nod, but didn't say much. Megan turned to Beth. "I assume you already checked on his order?" Beth hesitated. Megan narrowed her eyes. "Beth." Beth's lips pressed tighter. That was all the answer Megan needed. Beth hadn't done a damn thing to fix the problem. She had seen a moment to make Megan look bad, and taken it. Megan took a deep breath, then turned back to the customer. "I apologize, sir. Your coffee will be out in less than a minute." She turned and poured the damn coffee herself. By the time she set it in front of the man, the tension had shifted. Customers were watching. The other employees were watching. And Beth? Beth looked furious. "Good." Megan wiped her hands on a napkin, then looked Beth straight in the eye. "If you ever pull something like that again, you won't just be standing here embarrassing yourself. You'll be cleaning out your locker." Beth's nostrils flared. "You can't talk to me like that." "Actually," Megan said, voice like steel, "I can. Because I'm your boss." Silence. Jason was watching now, too, his arms crossed, tension in his shoulders. For a moment, Megan thought Beth was about to walk out, then and there. She had that look, like she was about to explode. But she didn't. She swallowed hard, turned and stormed toward the kitchen. Megan let out a slow breath. That was it, the last battle line. And she had won. An hour later, the real test arrived. Richard Lawson walked through the front doors, dressed in a sleek navy suit, his presence immediately shifting the energy of the diner. No one could ignore him, especially Beth and Jason. Richard scanned the restaurant, then met Megan's eyes with a small, knowing smirk. "Well?" he asked. "How's it going?" Megan exhaled. "Better than I expected, worse than I hoped." Richard chuckled. "That bad?" Megan crossed her arms. "Some people are still adjusting." Richard's gaze shifted, landing on Beth and Jason. Jason looked away immediately, but Beth? She held his gaze. Richard nodded, like he had expected nothing less. "Come outside," he said to Megan. She followed him out into the cool afternoon air. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the cars pass, the sun glinting off the diner windows. Then Richard sighed. "I fired your manager because he was a liability. He was bad for business. But that wasn't the real problem." Megan frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard turned to her. "The problem wasn't just Tom, it was the culture. People like Beth, Jason, they thrived in that old system, and now they don't know where they stand." Megan exhaled. "So what do I do?" Richard's gaze sharpened. "You remind them exactly where they stand, and if they can't adjust, you let them go." Megan stared at him. "Just like that?" Richard shrugged. "Megan, I didn't hire you to play nice. I hired you because you're the only person in that diner who gets it. I need you to decide who belongs here, not me." Megan let that sink in. She had been waiting for Richard to make the big decisions, waiting for him to step in. But this was her fight, her diner now. She squared her shoulders. "Understood," Richard smirked. "Good." They stood there for another moment. Then Richard reached into his pocket and handed her a small business card. "If you ever need anything, call me. But I don't think you will." Megan took the card, feeling something shift inside her. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was taking control. The next day, Beth quit. Megan wasn't surprised. Jason lasted another week before walking out mid-shift. The others, some stayed, some left, some stepped up. And Megan, she built something better. The new Lancaster Grill wasn't just about food. It was about respect, about treating people like they mattered, whether they were customers or employees. And people noticed. The diner started getting busier. Regulars came back. New customers spread the word. The business thrived. One afternoon, Megan stood behind the counter watching the place bustle with life. No more whispered insults. No more favoritism. No more waiting for someone else to fix things. This was hers now. She had fought for it, and she had won. Some fights aren't about money. Some battles aren't about power. Sometimes the biggest victory is proving that you belong, even when the world tells you that you don't. Megan had been fired for doing the right thing, and now she owned the place. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you don't belong, remember Megan's story. And make sure that when you get your chance, you take it. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.